Hello students, now let us see the women in development and how they are being approached by the government for their development. Involving women in development is an advanced attempt in development projects that emerged in 1970s. It is the integration of women into the global economies by improving their status and assisting in total development. Women were severely underemployed. As per census 2011, the final population of India is 1,1210.57 million, comprising 587.45 million, that is 48% females, and 623.12 million, 51.5% males. As per the census 2011, 41.1% of the female main and marginal workers are agricultural laborers, 24% are cultivators, 5.7% are household industry workers, and 29.2% are engaged in other works. As per National Sample Survey 68th round, the worker population ratio for females in rural sector was 24.8 in 2011-12, while that for males was 54.3. In urban sector, it was 14.7 for females and 54.6 for males. Among the states or union territories, worker population ratio for females in the rural sector was the highest in Himachal Pradesh, and this is at 52.4%, and in the urban sector it was the highest in Sikkim at 27.3%. Women were excluded from many types of formal jobs. So, 94% of the female workforce was engaged in the unorganized sector employed in agriculture, agroforestry, fisheries, handicrafts and so on. With growing awareness of women issues in 1970s, development planners began to try to integrate women better into their projects to make them more productive. The women in development approach initially accepted existing social structures in the recipient country and looked at how to better integrate women in existing developmental initiatives. The straightforward goal was to increase the productivity and earnings of women. The Constitution of India has given special attention to the needs of women to enable them to exercise their rights on equal footing with men and participate in national development. It aims at creation of an entirely new social order where all citizens are given equal opportunities for growth and development, and that no discrimination takes place on the basis of race, religion, caste, sex, etc. Planned development was considered to be the most efficient way for solving the numerous problems of poverty which has caused various imbalances and discriminations among vast numbers of people. The policy measures had serious implications for Indian women. Framing of the 5-year plans was the first major step taken in the direction of the welfare state. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India and the pioneer of the 5-year plans, stressed on welfare of women, children and tribals in our country. After attaining independence, the Government of India initially decided to pave the path to bring about social change based on 3 major areas: constitutional, legal reforms, planned development based on mixed economy and state support to social welfare activities. All these 3 policies are expected to create a democratic, just and prosperous society. All these 3 steps have their impact on the status of women. In the process of poverty eradication and reducing gender discrimination, the governments have been implementing various schemes and programs providing ways and means towards women development and empowerment. Self-help group movement, one among such programs, has been proved successful in fulfilling its objectives. However, it is felt that the other schemes and programs do have their prominent part in the process of women development and empowerment, and which are being successfully implemented. Prior to the United Nations Decade for Women, the rights based approach in development planning, concern with women was basically aimed at addressing women's needs through various developmental approaches. Over the past 5 decades, various developmental approaches have been employed by the international community in order to address the needs of women living in poverty. Currently, the most popular approach is the right-based approach to development. The rights-based approach to development is seen as a conceptual framework that integrates the norms, standards and principles of the international human rights system into the plans, policies and processes of development. The basic 10 principles of this approach include equality and equity, accountability and empowerment of participation. Participation involves inclusion. Participatory approaches normally contain 4 key stages: preference revelation, policy choice, implementation and monitoring, assessment and accountability. The International Human Rights Normative Framework affirms the right to take part in the conduct of public affairs. Active and informed participation by the poor, notes the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights, is not only consistent with but also demanded by the rights based approach. The guidelines drawn around a certain set of basic rights for which empirical data has shown to be relevant to most societies include right to adequate food, right to health, right to education, right to decent work, right to adequate housing, right to personal security, right to appear in public without shame, right in equal access to justice, political rights and freedoms. Individual freedom guarantees the capacity for political participation. In using economics to address the social basis of individual well-being and freedom, apart from being the ultimate goal of economic development, freedom is the most efficient means of realizing general welfare. Analyzing the nature of contemporary economic development from the perspective of human freedom development consists of enhancing the quality of human life through the process of making our freedoms larger. The rights-based approach that is currently in use was preceded by the technical fixes of the 1960s, moved into the basic needs approach of the 1970s, as well as the current concept of gender mainstreaming. Now, let us see the welfare approach in women development. In the earlier development approaches, the reduction and subsequent eradication of poverty have remained a major point of focus at both the international and national levels. Women in development, which grew out of disillusionment with the welfare approach, grounded itself in liberal feminism and actively criticized development theories of the 1970s that perceived men to be primary producers and household heads and viewed women as wives and mothers who were natural recipients of welfare. Women's productive roles neglects economic activities within the household and focused on non-domestic production as the main determinant of women's position in society. It has been noted that a process whereby men became wage laborers, however, not only intensifies women's work in the agricultural sector, but also draws them into production for the market. The Committee on Status of Women in its report towards equality has mentioned women are considered to be handicapped by social customs and social values, and therefore, social welfare services have specially endeavored to rehabilitate them. The Planning Commission defined 3 major areas in which they had paid special attention to women's development: education, social welfare and health. In India, a planned approach to provide special thrust to the welfare of women was adopted with the launching of the first 5-year plan in 1951, and the first 5-year plan contemplated welfare measures to implement for the benefit of poor women. The Central Social Welfare Board was established to deal with the problems of women. The CSWB recognized and realized the need for organizing women into Mahila Mandals or women's clubs as an approach to community development. The second 5-year plan intimately concentrated overall intensive agricultural development. However, the welfare approach to women's issues was determined recognizing women as workers. Further, the protection against injuries at work, maternity benefits and creches for their children was also provided. It also suggested immediate implementation of the principle of equal pay for equal work and provision for training to enable women to compete for higher jobs also. The third 5-year plan sincerely recognized the greater importance of education for women, which has been a major welfare strategy for women. This plan allocated the largest share for expanding social welfare services and condensed courses of education. As regards to wealth, maternal and child welfare programs were proclaimed in terms of maternal and child welfare, health education, nutrition and family planning. Thus, the emphasis on women education was continued during the fourth 5-year plan also, and the basic policy was to promote women's welfare as the base of operation. The outlay on family planning was stepped onto reducing the birth rate through education, immunization of preschool children and supplementary feeding, expectant and nursing mothers. There is also one provision through some approaches through ensuring equity and increasing efficiency of women through anti-poverty approach. The subsequent approaches succeeded the welfare approach are the equity approach that recognizes women's active role in the development process as reproductive, productive and community oriented. The anti-poverty approach is also concerned with meeting women's practical needs related to productive work. This was seen in the poverty alleviation projects and income generating schemes for women. This approach was, however, was subsequently replaced by the efficiency approach, and the efficiency approach is associated with the principles of the neoclassical economies that upholds the type of economic development that justifies the idea that the market system allocates resources efficiently. Efficiency or production at the lower cost is at the core of the International Monetary Fund or World Bank imposed economic liberalization policies being implemented by the most developing countries. The effectiveness approach originated in 1980s. Its ideas are linked to the concept of women in development, which was the inequalities women faced and how societies fail to acknowledge the impact of women in economic development. However, efficiency approach to not just include women into the development projects, but also reinforce their level of productivity and effectiveness in the labor market. So, this required the development of infrastructure and equipment that aided to increase women's earnings and productivity, especially women in the rural areas. Mainstreaming gender equality approach, also commonly referred to as gender mainstreaming, is the most recent development approach aimed on women. Gender mainstreaming ensures that all gender issues to address and integrated in all levels of society, politics and programs. It was realized that constitutional guarantees of equality would be meaningless and unrealistic unless women's right to economic independence is acknowledged and their training and skills as contributors to the family and national economy was improved. Consequently, National Plan of Action providing the guidelines based on United Nations World Plan of Action for Women came into force. The National Plan of Action identifies areas of health, family planning, nutrition, education, employment, legislation and social welfare for formulating and implementing of action programs for women and called for planned interventions to improve the conditions of women in India. The Women's Welfare as Development Bureau was set up in 1976 to act as a nodal point within the Government of India to coordinate policies and programs and initiate measures for women's development. The fifth 5-year plan happened to be during the decade of International Women's Decade, and submission of the report of the Committee on the Status of Women in India. Towards equality, the CSWI had comprehensively examined the rights and status of women in the context of changing social and economic conditions and the problems relating to the advancement of women. CSWI reported that the dynamics of social change and development had adversely affected the large section of the women and had created new imbalances and disparities. Further, the plan also recommended a strategic program of functional literacy to equip women with skills and knowledge to perform the functions as a good housewife. The need for training women in respect of income generating activities and their protection was stressed in the plan. Under the health programs, the primary objective was to provide minimum public health facilities integrated with family planning and nutrition for vulnerable groups, children, pregnant and lactating mothers. The sixth plan stressed the need of economic independence, educational advance and access to health care and family planning as essential for women's development. So, the strategy was threefold of education, employment and health. They are independent and dependent on the total development process. Seventh plan sought to generate awareness among women about their rights and privileges. The long term objectives of developmental programs in the seventh plan were to raise women's economic and social status in order to bring them into the mainstream of national development and recognize the importance of women in contributing to the various socio-economic, political and cultural activities. The seventh plan also emphasized the need to open new avenues of work for women and perceive them as crucial resource for the development of the country. Another salient and crucial recognition was the need for organization of women workers and unionization. Under this plan, a new scheme, Women's Development Corporation, had been taken up for promoting employment generation activities by supporting schemes from women's group and women from poorer sections of the society. Women's Development Planning and Monitoring Cell was also set up for collection of data and monitoring of plan programs. A very significant step therein was to identify and promote beneficiary oriented programs which extended direct benefits to women. During the seventh plan period, the Indian Parliament adopted national policy on education in, that is 1986, included a chapter on education for women's equality. The strategy in the eighth plan was to ensure that the benefits of development from different sectors did not bypass women and special programs were implemented to complement the general programs. The main objective of eighth plan was to extend the reach of services to women both qualitatively and quantitatively. Panchayat Raj institutions are involved in the designing and implementation of women's programs. The last approach and that is being observed today is women empowerment approach. Let us have a critical appraisal of this type of approach. Globalization heightens the vulnerability of national economies to external shocks. Weaker economies are less able to bear the consequence. There have been calls for a fundamental change in government economic reform programs, including a comprehensive review of the restructuring of public enterprises and formulation of a coherent industrial policy. Specifically, with the increasing number of poor people globally, the efficiency approach was followed by the empowerment approach. Hence, the approach of the eighth plan made a definite shift from development to empowerment of women. In order to meet the needs of women and children, there had been a progressive increase in the plan outlays over the time of 8 5-year plans. The outlay of 4 crore rupees in the first 5-year plan had gone up to 2000 crores in the 8th 5-year plan. The 9th 5-year plan came into effect from April 1st, 1997, and an approach paper had been developed by the Planning Commission and accepted by the National Development Council. The Ninth 5-year plan in this approach, focus was being laid on empowerment of women, and people's participation in planning and implementation of strategies was being stressed upon. An important objective in the approach was the empowerment of women. Here in this process, at the outset, it means choices for women and opportunities to avail these choices. The supportive environment should be provided to women at all stages by the home, school, religion, government and workspace. A supportive environment was one that gender sensitive. In all regional meetings, participants asked for gender sensitization on training at all levels in public and private sectors. Women are facing problems like feminization of poverty, inadequate investment in social sectors, increasing violence against women and stereotyped portrayal. So, the women in private and state media also, they are being portrayed in a stereotyped way. So, especially in television. There is a necessity for information and training opportunities, reservations and social services, etc. And the people's involvement is necessary for the success of any program. So, empowerment is about choices, and the ability exercise in women's choices will be limited unless they are more involved in the policy making. So, the ninth 5-year plan made an attempt to bring the women's issues within the policy making spheres. The government has set up national resources units for women, which act as an apex body for promoting and incorporating gender perspectives in politics and programs of the government. To achieve the goals laid down therein, a number of initiatives have been launched. They include enactment of legislation to ban sex determination tests so as to prevent female feticide. Equally important is the fact that the state governments are also drawing up plans of action to cater to the local requirements and ensure the holistic development of the girl child. The 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts of 1993 ensure reservation of 1/3 of the seats of women in all elected offices of local bodies in rural and urban areas. In rural areas, women have thus been brought to the center stage in the nation's efforts to strengthen democratic institutions. The 10th plan aims at empowering women through translating the recently adopted national policy for empowerment of women in 2001 into action and ensuring survival and protection, and also the development of children through the rights based approach. The 11th plan approach paper aimed to raise the sex ratio, and this plan intends to ensure 33% of the direct and indirect beneficiaries of all government schemes are women and girl children. The Government of India has declared 2001 as Women's Empowerment Year, and the national policy of empowerment of women has been set certain clear cut goals and objectives. The policy aims at upliftment of development and empowerment in social, economic and politico-cultural aspects by creating in them awareness on various issues in relation to their empowerment. Let us see what are the schemes for women and child development that are carried out by the government. Sahasekhti. The project jointly funded by IFAD, World Bank and the Government of India, which is being launched in October 1999 and culminated on 30th June 2005. The objective of the program was to bring out socio-economic development and empowerment of women through promotion of women self-help groups, microcredit and income generating activities. The project was conceived as a pilot project implemented in 335 blocks of 57 districts in 9 states. It established self-help groups covering about 2,44,000 women. This was a centrally sponsored project. Another project is Swayam Siddha. It was an integrated scheme for women empowerment through formation of self-help groups launched in February 2001. The long-term objective of the program was holistic empowerment of women through a sustained process of mobilization and convergence of all the ongoing sectoral programs by improving access of women to microcredit, economic resources, etc. Another program is Swalamban program. This is previously known as NORAD, Women's Economic Program. This program was launched in 1982-83 with assistance from the Norwegian Agency of Development Program, NORAD. NORAD assistance was availed till 1996 to 1997, after which the program is being run with the Government of India funds. The objective of the program is to provide training and skills to women to facilitate them to obtain employment or self-employment on sustained basis. There is also Swarna Jayanti Gram Swarojgar Yojana, which was being launched in April the year 1999 after restructuring the Integrated Rural Development Program and allied programs. It is the only self-employment program currently being implemented for the rural poor. The objective of SGSY is to bring the assisted Swarojgaris above the poverty line by providing them income generating assets through bank credit and government subsidy. The National Commission for Women was set up as a statutory body in January 1992 under the National Commission for Women Act 1990, which is the Act number 20 of 1990 of Government of India, to review the constitutional and legal safeguards for women, to recommend the remedial legislative measures, facilitate redressal of grievances and advise the government on all policy matters affecting women. In keeping with this mandate, the Commission initiated various steps to improve the status of women and worked for the economic empowerment during the year under report. It also took up the issue of child marriage, sponsored legal awareness programs, Parivarik Mahila Lok Adalats, and reviewed laws such as Dowry Prohibition Act 1961, PNDT Act 1994, and also the Indian Penal Code 1860 and the National Commission for Women Act 1990 to make them more stringent and effective. It organized workshops, consultations, constituted expert committees on economic empowerment of women, conducted workshops and seminars for gender awareness, and took up publicity campaign against female feticide, violence against women, etc., in order to generate awareness in the society against these social evils. The National Credit Fund for Women, or the Rashtriya Mahila Kosh, was set up in March 1993 as an independent registered society by the Department of Women and Child Development in Government of India's Ministry of Human Resource Development, with an initial corpus of 310 million, not to replace the banking sector, but to fill the gap between what the banking sector offers and what the poor need. The Kosh has three main roles. Wholesaling role. It acts as a wholesaling apex organization for channelizing funds from government and donors to retailing intermediate microfinance organizations. There is also a role of market development. It develops the supply side of the microfinance market by offering institution building support to new and existing but inexperienced IMOs by structures of incentives, transfers of technology, training of staff and other non-financial services. It also realizes that it can play value adding wholesaling role only when a sufficiently large and well established microfinance sector already exists. This depends on the number of IMOs and the sustainability of IMOs. Subsidized institution building increases the equity of any IMO as much as grants do large and premature disbursement of funds to the IMO can reduce the effectiveness of any institute building effort. Advocacy role, where the RMK as an advocate or agent for influencing development and microfinance policy and creating a more enabling policy and also the legal environment for spreading of microfinance activities in India. Being a creation and a representative of the government, RMK has a particular advantage in this area. It also was set up on 30th of March 1993 under the aegis of Department of Women and Child Development, Ministry of Human Resources Development, New Delhi. It was registered under Society Registrations Act 21 1860. The area of operation of the course covers whole of India. With this, the Women in Development topic concludes. Any questions?
Hello ma'am, this is Deepa. I have a question. What are the key objectives of RMK?
As we already discussed in our previous lesson, that is the Community Development of India, the Rashtriya Mahila Kosh main objectives are to promote the provision of microcredit to poor women, and second one is to adopt a quasi informal delivery system, and the third one is to provide a participatory approach in forming the self-help groups or the women groups in the rural areas. So, in order to make them or empower them powerfully in their own sectors, the women are being encouraged through funding through the Rashtriya Mahila Kosh. Any more questions? With this, I conclude the topic Women in Development. Thank you.